Good morning, good morning. Goodest good morning. And good morning. It's Monday, and we are coming off the edge of a supposed attempted Russian coup. And whew, okay, so there's a couple things we need to address with relation to so-called coup in Russia. The first thing is the it's hard to even say which is first. Okay, so quick recap. The story that you got over the weekend is that a private military organization called Wagner Paramilitary Group attempted to conduct a coup in Russia. And Rod says, I didn't know there was a koozie. So, sure enough, the story involved this private military organization headed by a guy named Yevgeny Prigozhin. And, of course, as soon as I heard that name, my first thought was, wait, Peter Prigozhin? You mean the academic papers hoax guy? 'Cause, whoa. But no. Prigozhin, not Bogosian. And Rod's already getting ahead of me, says headed by Biden and Hillary. So the Wagner Group is kind of the Russian version of Blackwater. And they have been used by the Russian government. I mean, they were originally established by the Russian intelligence community. And this Yevgeny Prigozhin guy is essentially, as I understand it, a figurehead. Now, the first thing probably to really, the most important thing to understand up front is that there really is, and this is why we're doing this on Meme War Monday, the Western media apparatus has no idea what's going on. They're completely in the dark here. And Robert Barnes talked about it a bit on the live stream with Viva Fry last night. Something to understand about the kind of the relationship between Western media and Russia generally is our Western media apparatus, while in part beholden to our foreign enemies through their entanglement with the Democrat Party, really don't have any understanding at all of what Vladimir Putin is. Vladimir Putin has enjoyed a higher, consistent approval rating from his people than any other world leader in history over an extended period of time. We have this idea that Russia is this total communist wasteland, but in large swaths of Russia, the people actually like Vladimir Putin. And don't get it twisted. This is not a vocal defense of Putin. I'm talking about understanding what the man is. He is a very, very talented intelligence agent. Right? Putin was KGB gold until he was the Putin that you know today. If you guys, if you've seen the interview that I did with Jack Barsky, the old KGB spy that was, okay, so Jack Barsky was one of those KGB spies that embedded in U.S. society. He came over here. He was born Dietrich. I forget his first name, but he was German born, educated in Russia, recruited by the KGB, and came to the United States as a spy for the KGB in the 70s. Served in the United States as a KGB spy from 79 to 89. And in 89, when he was ordered back to the Kremlin, and he finally told his wife, his American wife, for the first time what was going on. Like, right, she's been married to this guy for half a decade, had no clue, and all of a sudden he's sitting her down in the kitchen, like, okay, baby, so here's what's going on. They want me to come back, but look, I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna leave you here. You know, they had a kid, and in the interview I did with him, he was even very candid. He said that at that time he and that wife were already Iraqi, and she wouldn't have been enough to keep him back, but he loved his daughter, loved his kid, and was going to stay for her. And that's when the microphone in the smoke detector caught him basically giving a full confession, and the FBI used that to flip him. So go watch the interview that I did with Jack Barsky. It's on the Brushfire Mind. I'll have to, you know what, I'll make a note. That may only be on the YouTube channel. I may need to go back and republish that on Rumble as well. But Barsky was a contemporary of Putin. Now, they were in the KGB at the same time and roughly the same rank, about the same age. Barsky's a couple of years older, but they weren't co-stationed, but they were both, and especially Putin, they were well known enough within the organization to be aware of one another. So Barsky actually had some pretty interesting opinions on Putin, and during his early tenure in the KGB, Putin was regarded early on as being just kind of a mediocre spook, and then it quickly became apparent that this guy's actually an extraordinary spook who, as part of being very good at what he does, understands the absolute value of at least functional anonymity. Well, anonymity has extraordinary value, but so does celebrity. Both of these things in the extreme are powerful in a way you just cannot imagine without giving it a lot of study and understanding. The power of celebrity, which Putin has traded his anonymity away for, allows him to essentially speak reality into existence within the sphere of his influence, which, by the way, is diminished somewhat outside of Russia, but the power of his intelligence apparatus is very, very far-reaching. It would not hurt your chances for the future and understanding kind of the world that we're in to go and rewatch some of the old interviews with Yuri Bezmenov as he described some of the active kinetic intelligence operations being conducted against the United States and how those much of the conflict that we enjoy politically here, especially things like the argument over sexual deviancy, are a direct result of active Russian interference and propagation. So, at the end of the day, you've got something happened in Russia, and what exactly happened is almost a complete unknown. Now, there's a lot of room for speculation. There's a lot of room for speculation based on the very reasonable position that we take here on the show at the BFM of beginning with the presupposition of Kabuki Theater, right? Think back a bit to, and Cameron and I have discussed this several times on the show. You think back a bit to January 6th, and I was much more skeptical of the narrative at first than Cameron was, and Cameron made a lot of points about how no matter how it turns out, it's bad optics. And I said at the time, you're not wrong, it's bad optics, but the thing you have to understand, the thing that you have to take into account is the incredibly high probability that the entire occurrence is fabricated, that the whole situation was a wag the dog, right? And look around your country, guys. You look at the January 6th committee, and not only was it just an obvious kangaroo court, but we now know that much of the so-called evidence there was fabricated. Like, they showed videos of people doing things, and they added sound. They added actors saying things to that video. And we know that to be true now because the original video itself came from a camera that doesn't have microphones. It was a pure video feed. There was no audio. So the Democrats on the committee had their producer add audio to make it more shocking. Well, that's like adding blood to a murder weapon to make it more believable. That's pure evidence tampering, right? Even if the butcher knife in question happens to have actually been the murder weapon, going back after the fact and putting red paint on it so that it looks more menacing when it's presented to the jury is in fact tampering. That is also a crime, because what you are doing is you are unlawfully biasing the evidence against the accused. And of course, as we know, anytime that the law is unclear, the interpretation must favor the defendant. So you look at this situation, and I've got an article pulled up. I went to CNN for the article because it's always worth it to look at the problems with the interpretation of the inadequate system. Sergeant Major says, "I will never believe anything presented as evidence." There's a statement for you. We might have to have a conversation about that. But yeah, this whole thing begin with the presupposition of Kabuki Theater, that the whole thing is essentially a black propaganda op. So CNN says Putin vows to punish armed uprising by Wagner militia as Russia is plunged into crisis. Let me remind you, a man drove a truck into a wall by the White House recently, and they very carefully displayed a pristine, recently ironed, brand new Nazi flag at the scene. And then, just a week later, in the small print at the back of the newspaper, were the articles where the guy that they arrested for that was released without charges. Because it was never anything but a Kabuki Theater. So Putin vows to punish armed uprising by Wagner militia as Russia is plunged into crisis. Vladimir Putin is facing the greatest threat to his authority in 2 decades after the head of the Wagner paramilitary group launched an apparent insurrection, claimed control of military facilities in 2 Russian cities, and warned that his troops would head for Moscow. Staring down a sudden and staggering escalation of internal tensions that have simmered for months, the Russian president said on Saturday that those on path of treason or armed rebellion would be punished. This is a stab in the back of our country and our people, he said in an address to the nation, threatening a harsh response for those planning an armed rebellion. So this is propaganda that's being generated by this guy, Yevgeny Prigozhin, who, let me remind you, this is the same personality that has been kind of the forefront in the Ukraine conflict. And oh no, please don't send your people to this place. We're weak there, and if we're us Russians, we're over here shaking in our boots because if you attack us in this one small city, we're just not ready for you. And so Ukrainians go and attack them in that one small city and get massacred. And they keep falling for it. And that guy, yes, that guy, the one that keeps setting meme bait traps and slaughtering Ukrainians wholesale, is the guy who is apparently going to take over Moscow and oust Putin and take over the Russian government in this drama that unfolded over the weekend. The thing is over, by the way. Prigozhin has left for I forget where they said he's going, but Prigozhin has basically left. He's headed out, going to be somewhere safe, and the coup is over. The coup wasn't stopped, right? Putin didn't suddenly deploy military forces and suppress the coup. It just ended. Now, there's a lot of kind of speculatory information flying around back and forth on Twitter over the weekend that the CIA came in and paid the whole thing off. But guys, honestly, I'd be more surprised to hear that it were true that the CIA took U.S. American dollars, taxpayer dollars, and bribed this apparent private military leader to shut down his coup. I'd be less surprised to hear that, to learn that were actually true, than to be shown evidence that the CIA basically ran the whole thing from the beginning, right? You know, how many of you were surprised when you learned that the Whitmer kidnapping was entirely an FBI operation? That the FBI planned and nearly executed a plan to kidnap a Democrat from an elected office, and the result was a handful of potential MAGA voters got wrapped up in a scam where the vast majority of everyone involved was FBI. The extent of the corruption that has gripped our country is terrifying. And it's because of things like the Whitmer coup. The idea that there's anything happening in the world that is bad and is not part of some conspiracy orchestrated, not by some shadowy cabal, but by the American government itself, is becoming more and more difficult to believe. It is becoming every day less and less reasonable to not immediately assume that all evils in the world today are intentionally being conducted by the Democrat-controlled American government. And pain me though it do to admit it, the Republican Party is not much better. I think the best you can say is that while the Democrat Party is corrupted with bribes and scandal external to the nation, our nation's enemies have taken command by hook and by crook of the Democrat Party, and it is working tirelessly to destroy the country. The Republican Party is only corrupted by the greed of its individual members. Right? So when you go into the voting box, you've got the big D for destroy America versus the big R for I'm just here to get rich. And there's not an option on your ticket. The best you can hope for is the guy that wants to get rich needs to hire you to fix his car. Because those are your options now. You're choosing, when you talk about the lesser of two evils, that sentiment has become more and more a part of the American political climate. Has just become more and more a standard bearer for the American political climate, and that is terrifying. So, what can we think about going forward? In this instance, we had this paramilitary mercenary organization. I don't honestly believe that there was a legitimate coup attempt. I believe that there was some Kabuki Theater going on that looked like one. But I want you to think about the world we live in, where there really are billionaires out there who could, sure enough, fund an activity like this. I'm a little surprised, honestly, that we've made it this far with people like Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, people who have shown that they have clearly evil intentions and functionally unlimited resources. And we have not seen them field private armies in open armed conflict among one another. Essentially, we live in a world with dozens of Lex Luthors and no Clark Kents. So we've talked many times on the show about the various potentialities for a dystopian future and how that future might look more Orwellian or more Huxleyan. Right? Are we going to look at a 1984? Are we going to be looking at a Brave New World? Are we going to be looking at a Fahrenheit 451 situation? Clearly, we're already living on the Animal Farm, where everyone is created equal, but some are created more equal than others. and, that created more equal than others is some people are simply above the law. And I don't care what the law itself says. As a matter of practical reality, some people are above the law. But in a world of Lex Luthors, all of a sudden the panopticon may be less of a concern. There's a fantastic science fiction novel that I've read probably a dozen times in the last 30 years called Snow Crash. And without going too deep into the plot of the book, the book describes a dystopian future where there are no national governments, right? It's not a one world government type of thing. Instead, you have these city-states, or corpo-states, right? And basically the headquarters of a major corporation is functionally a nation unto itself. And it doesn't have, the corpo nation, the corpo state, doesn't have a military or a police force. Instead, there's another corpo state that is in the business of police or in the business of military, and the other corpo states, which are, fast food joints, restaurant chains, software developers, whatever business you can think of, they're all these giant multinational corporations. And each one of them is essentially a state unto itself. The rest of the world, outside of the corporate state entities, functions very much the way that you think of it functioning now, except there's essentially no law enforcement out and about. All war happens between corporations, which actually functionally limits the activity of war, because there's just not much call for McDonald's to go to war with Microsoft, for example. Instead, McDonald's goes to war with Taco Bell, and they fight over service area, over customer reach, territory. It's essentially an anarcho-capitalist future where it's every business for itself, and the only law is whatever a person with the money to pay for it can finance the enforcement of. Well, let's be real. In a country where we have, Rod says neo-feudal, very much a neo-feudal post-nation anarcho-capitalist dystopian future. But you look at the way the world works today, and your police force is little more than a revenue collection agency, right? Your local police do very little in the way of preventing, solving, or prosecuting actual crime. They're far too busy revenue collecting from innocent citizens who dare to drive a few miles above the speed limit. And yes, I get it. There's an additional risk that you assume and impose on others when you break the speed limit, but the fact is, like where I live, for example, I'm in Rockdale County. I had the cops called on me the other day while I was shooting pictures of a house because some jerk off didn't like that I was parked in front of his house to shoot the house across the street. When I was parked on the public road, he called the sheriff. The sheriff came out, told him he was wrong. Go back in your house and mind your own business. And then that sheriff, right? And I've gotten this sorted out with the sheriff's department, but I'm still fighting with my insurance company over it. That sheriff's deputy went directly from having dealt with me to responding to a car accident where, he's 3-4 blocks away from where I'm working. I'm working the entire time that he's dealing with his car accident. I got no clue about it until my insurance companies start getting after me a month later because this dumbass sheriff took his notes in his little notebook, and then when he filled out his paperwork, he put my license plate number down on the car accident report. So I had to, thank God I'm smart enough to say, oh, hey, I got a couple of cops here. I want your business cards. I want the incident numbers. I want your badge numbers. And I was able to get that sorted out. And so now the law knows that I didn't fuck up, that the law fucked up. But how many of you out there understand that you have to pay attention to stuff like that? Because we live in a situation where if you're Hillary Clinton, you can do whatever you want. You can break the law all day, right? If you're Joe Biden, you can just laugh at law. If you're Hunter Biden, you can commit federal gun crimes and walk. But if you're an average citizen, you cannot even live your day-to-day life without ever doing anything wrong and not run the risk of getting on the wrong side of the law. The law is not there for you. The law is against you. So I am going to have to go ahead and put a pin in it there. I'm running just a little bit over. I want to say thanks, guys, for watching this morning, and I will try and remember later today when I've got a little time, I'll try and pull down that Barsky interview and put it over on Rumble after I double check whether or not. I don't think I put it on Rumble, but it is on YouTube, the interview with Jack Barsky. That's definitely worth checking out, especially while we've got all this stuff going on with Russia and Ukraine, because he and I did talk about that in some detail and some depth. So I'm going to go ahead and put a pin in it right there. Thanks for watching, guys. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.